Hello dear friends, before going to the video, please subscribe our channel for more new videos and information. Game of Thrones is a work of fiction rather than a reality show, whereas The Last Kingdom is more historically based. Which show is better, Game of Thrones or The Last Kingdom? The Last Kingdom and Game of Thrones are said to be extremely similar to one another because both series are set during eras reminiscent of the Middle Ages. Game of Thrones is a work of fiction rather than a reality show, whereas The Last Kingdom is more historically based. The political character of the series and the various wars depicted in the shows are just two examples of how they remain similar in so many ways. Of course, both Game of Thrones and The Last Kingdom stand out on their own. But which of the two shows is better, The Last Kingdom or Game of Thrones? The question, which show is better, The Last Kingdom or Game of Thrones, is frequently asked, especially by those who haven't seen either. As a result, if you're curious about which of The Last Kingdom and Game of Thrones is better, keep reading until the end. Which show is better, Game of Thrones or The Last Kingdom? Despite having a much lower budget than Game of Thrones, The Last Kingdom was able to put up a good fight and has grown fairly popular. Nonetheless, Game of Thrones is superior to The Last Kingdom. Game of Thrones simply has a greater cultural impact and more impressive visuals and fight scenes. The plot of The Last Kingdom, on the other hand, flows more naturally. As a result, Game of Thrones was unable to live up to the anticipation and quality of the story that we saw in previous seasons. The Last Kingdom, on the other hand, flows more naturally. As a result, Game of Thrones was unable to live up to the anticipation and quality of the story that we saw in previous seasons. The Last Kingdom, on the other hand, has remained fairly consistent in how it has told its story since we could see where it was going. While working within its limited financial constraints, The Last Kingdom was able to produce a fantastic series that appears more expensive than the numbers would indicate. However, Game of Thrones is simply the superior series, not only because of its massive budget, but also because of its general appeal. A synopsis of the show, The Last Kingdom. The Last Kingdom is a reimagining of Bernard Cornwell's Saxon stories. Because a film will provide a definitive ending to the plot, all of the books will be adapted from beginning to end. The show follows the life of Uhtred, an English-born nobleman raised by Vikings. Except for the fact that Uhtred is a fictitious character, the story's depiction of the Viking-Saxon conflict includes him as a figure who became involved in some way. Any fan would be surprised to learn that The Last Kingdom's first season was only budgeted at $10 million. Yes, one of the best medieval shows available to watch has a modest budget that pales in comparison to the budgets of other shows. The action in The Last Kingdom is one of its most powerful and underappreciated aspects. You can't get enough of how well the action scenes were done because the conflicts are so intricate and well choreographed. The Last Kingdom is intricate and clever in how it brings its action sequences and battles to life, even if the conflicts lack the epicness and gore that some series have. A synopsis of the HBO series Game of Thrones. The books that served as the inspiration for Game of Thrones were written by George R.R. Martin. The television show, on the other hand, deviated from the source material and made a few changes. This was especially noticeable once the show had progressed beyond the scope of the books. Having said that, Game of Thrones had a strong start because it followed a clear path based on the books. However, the ending was unsatisfying, especially since the subsequent episodes of the show did not adhere to the original books. It is estimated that HBO spent approximately $1.5 billion on the production of the 8 seasons of Game of Thrones, indicating that no expense was spared in order to present one of the largest and most epic productions in television history. According to reports, each episode of Game of Thrones' later seasons costs $10 billion. Game of Thrones doesn't have many battles because the plot focuses on the political aspects of the series. On the other hand, no expense was spared in its deeds, and you could truly tell how large and well done the battles were by what you saw and how brilliantly they were executed.